Welcome back to Prophecy's Hammer. Today we're going to be taking Revelation 12 and we're going to decipher it. We're going to take the cipher that I gave you in the last video and we're going to apply it to the structure. And I hope some of you took that cipher and went ahead and did that, because if you have, then you've seen quite a shift in the perspective of what we're actually looking at here. It's quite incredible. We'll see that really take effect in chapter 13. Today we're going to just I'm not going to change the words, but I'll interpret it as we go through the text, applying the cipher as we go. So let's briefly look at our structure again. So here we have our structure we looked at, and we said today we're going to be looking at chapter 12, and we're going to unwrap from 12 straight to the end. And we're going to show that this third layer of prophecy is actually a linear timeline. Okay? And as we showed you, these are three layers, 1, 2, 3. They all run concurrently at the same time, over the same time period, and we showed you the details that prove that they bring us to the wrath, and the actual wrath is here. So let's look at that briefly again as well, just to remind us. So here's our three layers, 1, 2, 3. And here's our wrath. And as we see, the details are here. We have a great quake. There was a great quake. At the end of our second series, there was a great quake. And I actually missed this detail in our last video, which is fine. There's a lot of small details here, so forgive me for that. And there's a great quake. Here's our actual wrath. We have God's wrath, the wrath of the Lamb. His wrath is come. Thy wrath is come. The wrath of God. The wrath, the wrath, the wrath. Here's the actual wrath, because in 15 we get the 7 angels, and for in them is the wrath of God. And then the beasts give them the vials, which are full of the wrath of God. There's no wrath until we actually get here. Okay? And so, as we saw, the end of this series brings us to the wrath. The end of this series brings us to the wrath. And this one we're going to walk through. And what we really want to pay attention here is what we see is the reflection of these details back on these portions of the text, telling us that these are actually the same events, right? There were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake. There were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail. There were voices and thunderings and lightnings, and there was a great earthquake, a great hail. Okay? So we're going to see this happen several times today. And we're going to roll over into chapter 13 and see how those details reflect back into 12, tying them together as a linear timeline. And then we'll actually jump ahead in 17. We're going to see another one that's, well, we'll see it when we get there. And then I'll show you that detail I promised you in 2 other videos. A small but significant shift. And we'll see that at the end here. So let's move forward and look at our cipher once again. Let's see that. So here we are. All right, so here's our symbols. This is what we interpreted them into. And there's where they're found in Scripture. And essentially they're all coming directly from angels from heaven. So these are unquestionable interpretations. And here's our characters. All right, and if you don't understand these, you'll have to go back and watch our War with the Beast, the image of the beast, the abomination of desolation. The second beast has 2 horns that cause fire to come down, and our previous Prophecy Hammer videos as well. These will all be below. But for today, we're going to look at chapter 12. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of these guys. We're going to add another character here. So let's do that real quick. All right, and we have the stars of heaven, which is an angel, a heavenly being, and many of us are aware of this. And how do we know? Because a star fell from heaven, and to him was given the key. So to this star was given a key that fell from heaven. And of course, in chapter 1 of Revelation, we have the Lord calling the stars in his hands angels. So we got total confirmation in that respect. So what we're going to do is, by the end here, we're going to have another character added. But there isn't actually, that I'm aware of, an interpretation given, but we're going to see how the text interprets it for us, now that we understand what we understand here. Okay? So let's quickly look at chapter 12. Here we have a snapshot from eSword. I'll put a link to their software below. So, like many publishers, they put subtitles, which helps us break down the text and to give us verse numbers. What we're going to do is we're going to eliminate all these verse numbers. We're going to get rid of these, and we're going to add our own. And we can all do this. It's a simple little thing that we can do to see the text more clearly. So let's look at that now. Okay, so here we have our first 12 verses. I've broken them up into their own little sections. And then on page 2, we have the rest of the chapter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a section, and then I'm going to interpret it. But these headings should already tell you who they are. All right, so let's start. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. So, first thing we can notice in the Greek is the woman is a wife. It's more specifically interpreted as a wife. So this is a bride. And when we look in Genesis, we see chapter 37. We see Joseph's dream, where he says the sun, the moon, and the 12 stars, or the 11 stars in his dream. And you can see that on the screen right there in front of you. And Israel himself, Jacob Israel himself, interprets the dream. He says that that's him, his mother, and the 12 tribes. It's very clear that this is Israel. And this, we have her condition. Now we have to keep in mind, this is a linear timeline. What we're going to get here is a introduction of characters in a summary. Then we're going to get a detailed story. I should have said that a moment ago, but we'll see this all unravel. So here we are. And she, being with child, travailing in birth, child cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. So here's Israel calling out to our Father for the Messiah. That's what this is. Essentially where we're at right now. We're asking for the Messiah to be sent to end all this nonsense. So this is the condition. This is just prior to the Lord being born. All right? So let's look at this guy. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. So one thing we can notice is we actually have an introduction. And there appeared, and then there also appeared. It's like enter stage left, enter stage right, right? So here we know who this is, right? This is the big dummy. But it also symbolizes empire, the 7 heads and 10 horns. This is his empire. We saw this in the image of the beast. It ties all these characters together. And we'll see this again reflected to us in a few moments. All right, and the 7 heads are 7 crowns upon his heads. All right, so this is Satan and his empire. And his tail drew, and this actually means dragged. If you want to be specific in the Greek, it means to drag. And his tail dragged of the 3rd part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. This is the angels that were following him. Because why is his tail dragging them? Because when you cling to the coattails of someone, when he gets thrown down, you get thrown down with him. The whole criminal enterprise goes down with it. Okay, so we have Satan, his empire, and his minions. And this, again, is prior to the Lord arriving. This is an outline we're getting. And now we have the dragon stood before the woman, which is ready to be delivered for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And her child was caught up unto God into his throne. So I don't think there's any doubt who this is. This is the Holy King that's coming, right? Nobody, I mean, there's no question here what this is, okay? So the dragon, Rome, right, ruled over Israel, right? And he was waiting to destroy the Messiah when he was born. Okay? So he's sitting there waiting, and this is the condition. She's travailing in birth, and he's waiting for the birth. You see that? And then she brings forth a man-child, who, right? He brings forth the Messiah, who is to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And if we want to, we could literally slap the gospel right here in our timeline, right there. Go right here, boom, right in this space, because here he's born, and here he's caught up to God, right? So we could literally drop the gospel right smack dab in there. So timeline-wise, when we look at the text, we can see these pieces, and it really fills out our story when we can identify these. Okay, so he's caught up to his throne, and Israel runs for it, right? And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Okay, so here's our characters. Up here, Israel dragon, and here's our little summary. And we're going to prove this in a second. Okay, so now let's move forward to the war in heaven. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. And he cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now come is salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe unto the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. So, what do you notice? This, and everything after this, we need our cipher. It's all symbolic language. But this is not. None of this. This is literally what goes down in heaven. This is exactly what happens. Exception of two possible words, which I'll show you in a second. But that's, to me, very interesting. Everything talked about in heaven, we're just told exactly how it is. But when it's down here, it's symbolic. So those of us who love him and seek him, and our eyes are opened by the Spirit, by the mercy of our seeking, we get to interpret it like this. So let's look at what we're going on here. All right, so there was a war in heaven. Well, the first thing that pops into my head when I read this is when the Lord was talking in Matthew 11:12, when he says, And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. That's what was going on in heaven before he went up to his throne. It's almost a mirror image of what we see going on down here now. Strangely enough. I know it sounds strange, but let's move further. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. So here he is, thrown down to the earth. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. If you remember in the last video, I said to look up this in the Greek. I said it's very specific. And as you see on the screen, it says specifically the whole world is talking about the Roman Empire. So So we got to focus here on exactly what we're looking at. And we already know who that empire is. It's the democracy of the earth. Okay? We'll go further into that as well, coming in the future. Okay, so he was cast into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. They were cast out with them, right? Cast to the earth. They were cast out with him because they were clinging to his tail. They were following him. Don't follow evil, or you're going to get cast down with them. All right, so I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now has come salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them day and night. Self-explanatory. I don't think I have to explain this to anybody. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death. So therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe unto the inhabitants of the earth and the sea. What do we have empires rising up out of in the next chapter? The first one rises up out of the sea, and the second out of the earth. And they're getting a warning to these groups. This is a warning to those peoples, us. Okay, because the devil's come down having great wrath because he knows that he has a short time. So we can see that this occurred right after the Lord went up to his throne. This is what we've been contending with for 2,000 years. That's why it's a mess down here. All right, so the dragon is now trapped on the earth. He's going to go after Israel and those who love the Lord. All right. And when the dragon saw that he was cast to the earth, he was persecuted the woman, which brought forth the man-child. And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and a times, and a half a time, from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Okay, so when Satan saw he was cast to the earth, he persecuted Israel, which brought forth the Messiah. Okay? And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into a place where she's nourished for a time, times, and half a times from the face of Rome. So in history, we know from about 63 AD to about, a couple hundred years, Rome persecuted, there's no doubt, Rome persecuted those who loved the Lord, the living God and his holy Son. There's no doubt about that. It's still going on today, but it was it's quite literally a festival of horrors for a few hundred years. And so Israel went to a place where she's protected from the face of the serpent and for those of you unaware, a time is 360 days, which is 1 year. Times is 2 years, so 720, and a half a time, which is 180. And all these add up to 1,260. Now, isn't that interesting? Didn't we just see that number a moment ago? So why is the woman running into the wilderness if she's already there? Right? Well, like I said, this is a summary. And the text is going to prove it to us right now. Those 2 are the same exact event. Watch this. Let me zoom out a little bit here. So we have both verses here. And along the left side, we have the words. On the right, we have the Greek letter. Okay? Very simple. In yellow, we have identical Greek words. All right, everything in yellow is identical. So let's read them side by side. And the woman fled And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle that she might fly. And of course, there were no airlines back then, and Israel, they don't have wings. This is symbolically saying she fled, right? She might fly. She's taken off. Where? Into the wilderness. Into the wilderness, where she has the place. Into her place, prepared of God that they should feed her. Where? They should feed her. Same word, right? For how long? 1,203 score. 1,260 days. 1,260 days. It's the exact same event. That's what this is. Okay? We just get a little more detail. This is saying that Rome is getting resistance and can't persecute anymore. So let's come back to the text here. So he's persecuting her. Those little take off, they've gotten a place where it's more difficult for Satan in Rome to persecute. So what happens here? Watch this. This is I think the most trickiest part of the whole book almost. In Rome, right? The serpent Rome did what? Cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that she might cause her to be carried away of the flood. What did we say about the Second Empire when he speaks like a dragon? Speaks like Rome. He's using the laws of Rome. So when a country speaks, it's speaking forth laws, right? So Rome, in about 313, made worshiping the Lord legal. Why? So the multitudes of nations and peoples and tongues in our cipher, right? As a flood would carry her away. What does that mean? What's the word I'm looking for? Overwhelm her with evil doctrine. Just like when Israel came into Canaan, the Lord said, wipe them all out and chase them off the land, or you're going to mix with them and turn to their gods and turn your back to me. And that's exactly what Satan's trying to do here in this text, which is what he's done quite tragically, effectively. But many are called and few are chosen. So let's try to be the few and pray that the Lord will open his hand further. Let's please pray for that. I'm sorry, I digressed here. Okay, so he's trying to get Israel, right? Israel to be flooded away with the doctrines of Rome. All right? Now here's our new character, the earth. Helped Israel. Who's the earth? These are the non-Israelites that turned to the Lord. Right? And those people helped the woman and testified of the Lord, opened her mouth, right? And swallowed up the flood. Did what? Converted this group of people that Satan went after Israel. They turned to the Lord instead of the other way around. Right? It swallowed up the flood with the dragon cast out of his mouth. So that's what's happening here. Satan's trying to overwhelm those who love the Lord with false doctrine, and so that they may turn from the Lord, but instead, those who believed Israel and turned to him helped Israel, and they testified of the Lord, and those people from Rome, the pagans, actually turned and became converted and saved. Praise his holy name, yeah. So what happens next? The dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. Yeah, he's persecuting her. Now he's trying to entice her and overwhelm her. It's not working. And this word for wrath actually means exasperated. If you've ever tried something over and over and over that you think is going to be simple, you'll get exasperated, like, ah! And that's what the dragon is. He's like, what? So what does he do? What does Satan do? Well, we turn the page. He raises up this empire to make war with her. Again, we have our translated verse we've seen in our previous video, and the image of the beast more precisely. So he goes to make war with the woman, and what does he do? He raises up this empire. And how do we know? Because here's his empire. Right? We just saw his empire in chapter 12. And we also know because the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. To do what? Well, what we just said. To make war with the saints. Right? So let's look at that. Look at these details. Here we have the same empire, right? We've already seen these details. So this is confirming Satan's continuing his empire. He raised this one up, right? So he's going to make war at the end of chapter 12. Went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keeps the commandments and have the testimony of Jesus. And who are these people? They're obviously the saints. Who else could they be? Right? So what does he do? He makes war with them. Here it is. It's a linear story. So just like we saw with the wrath, these details reflect back. The same details. Again, we saw this in the image of the beast straight through. So now, let's jump ahead to chapter 17 and see one that's much more subtle. So if we've read Revelation, spent time in it a lot, we'll perceive there's a change in chapter 17 in relation to chapters 12 to 17. What we'll see is from chapter 12 all the way to chapter 16, John is strictly having visions. That's it. He's getting vision after vision after vision. Or I should say one long set of visions. But in 17, he has an angel come up to him, and he's having an interaction. Right? And that's what this is. This is the angel talking to him, explaining things that he just saw in these visions. Okay? And what we're going to see is this reflects back to what we just saw. So let's read it. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. And here we have it. And behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. Right? The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom yet. And I saw an empire rise up out of them, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon its horns 10 crowns. 10 crowns. They have received power as kings now 1 hour with the beast. Rome, there's no crown, because when John's seeing that vision, he's seeing the whole empire as one. The angel's explaining to him that empire, whereas the visions break it apart for us. So here it is, no crowns, and here we have the crowns. Okay, so John's showing the present tense in chapter 17. Right here. The woman sat on a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So the 10 horns that you saw on this beast, John, have received no kingdom as yet. So he's seeing it in the present tense as in chapter 12, right? The Roman Empire in his day, he was in the time of, the persecution, or just prior, during. And again, here we go. They're all the same empire, right? They're all the same empire. So let's now turn to 13:1, where I want to show you that detail that I've been mentioning about several times. Now, when we read this, our cipher applied, it's very, very well easy to understand, right? And even though we haven't interpreted these with the cipher, we know what they symbolize. And so we understand what we're reading here. But there's still something strange about the grammar, isn't there? Let me show you what it is. Chapter 14:8, 14:9. All right, let's read this. And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink the wrath of wine of God, and horror and weeping and gnashing of teeth and terrible things for them. Excuse me. But the first thing we notice, what do we notice? We have a her and a his, right? And we know Babylon is a she, because right there in 17, she's called a woman. Babylon is a woman. At the end of chapter 17, that great city, the woman you saw is that great city. And of course, 18 fills in the detail of her destruction. So we do know that Babylon is a woman in reference. But when we come to the beast, when we look around, we don't have any indication of a male or female. And when we understand that Rome and Babylon are essentially the same entity, we want to say this is a her, don't we? But let's look at the Greek real quick. What's going on here? These are the same word. Her, G848. His, G848. And these are the people that receive the mark. His and his. Let's look at this word real quick. How to. Self. So it's a reflective relation. So whatever the noun is, it interprets appropriately, accordingly. So with Babylon, we know it's a her. With the beast, they've always said it's a him or a his. And of course, those who get the mark would be more of a their, right? In their hands and in their foreheads. But because we know the beast is an empire, wouldn't it be an it? So let's apply that. Let's apply these to the reflective relations to the text and see what we get. And we'll just read this verse. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the empire and its image, and receive the mark in their forehead or in their hand, right? Now that makes a lot more sense. I also want to note that his is actually not there, so it's still italicized, and she is actually not there in the text as well. So I didn't highlight those. But let's apply this to Revelation 13:1. And I stood over many multitudes of peoples and nations of many languages, and I saw an empire rise up out of them, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon its horns 10 crowns, and upon its heads the name of blasphemy. Now that makes a lot more sense because an empire isn't it. Okay? And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority, right? Well, actually, Rome gave it its power and its seat and great authority. Now, I'm going to tell you to do 3 things with chapter 13. And 3 things only. And if you do this, and we'll see this in the next video, you'll see a dramatic shift in your perspective when you read this chapter. Okay? So we've already applied the cipher to the first portion of 13:1. So go through the rest of the chapter, and everywhere you see the word beast, change it to empire. right? Copy and paste the chapter and go and change these. Change it to empire. Everywhere you see him or his, change to it or its, right? Just like we see here. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority? No. Rome gave it the empire that it raised up, Satan raised up, and its power and its seat and great authority. And if you apply changing the beast to empire, him or his to it or its, and the dragon, change that to Rome. And you'll be ahead on the next video. And if you've already been following along, you'll pretty much understand the entire chapter. So, until then, we'll see you next time. Peace of Yah be with you.